Thanks, Tom. Thank you for being here, and a topic that is a big deal for me and to the agency, and I think to our country and to our future. As mentioned, we've announced our proposal June 2nd. The comment period is open till December 1st, so you still have a number of days to get your comments in. As of last week, I had heard there were 1.6 million comments. So we can take a few more. I suspect some of those are postcards, check the box, I'm for or I'm against, and so we'll take those as they come. But supposedly we've gotten some really good comments to date, and so some things are already being considered. So I do want to mention one thing, and that is that the comment period being open, we'd prefer that you give your comments in writing to the record, and in the presentation there's a slide that shows how to do that. Anything you tell me will be informal and will not be entered into the docket. I don't want to have to do that and try to attempt to understand exactly how you want to do your project. As you all know, one of the big challenges for our country today is looking at greenhouse gas emissions. And with this rule announced in June, the proposal actually addresses the largest single source of those greenhouse gas emissions, which is the electrical industry. And so that's something that should not be a surprise to anyone here. That's certainly a topic that you well understand. And the process here is that what EPA does is, we will set a goal for each state, and the state then has the flexibility to come up with a plan to meet the goal. This was one of the critical things that came up during the public comment process last summer. We heard over and over again, each state is different, each state has a different utility mix, each state has a different rural versus urban mix. These are all things that need to be considered. The states are the best area to do that. And so we're setting a goal, but the solution to meeting that goal is going to be derived by each state. Now, states can partner together and come up with a multi-state goal that gives them an additional year to submit their plan, but we don't know if one or more of our states will do that. That will be up to them, and they have a little bit more time to work on it. One thing that's kind of critical is that we have this proposal. The goal for us is to get in place the final rule by next June. So reading through the 1.6 plus comments, trying to determine what part of the rule that was proposed stays, what part needs to be modified, what part can be dropped, what needs to be changed entirely. All that is going to go on next spring. We'll get the rule in place. So we really want to make sure that each state has the appropriate goal and then aim towards that. This is a brief graph that shows the relative nature of the decline that we're looking at across the state in our region alone. It's pretty much, it shows a straight line trajectory, but we don't expect that's how it's going to work. People are going to be bringing facilities offline, perhaps. Other facilities are going to come online, and so we expect it'll be more of a curve. But this shows over time period, moving from the 2012 baseline to 2030 for the final goal and what we're looking at. And the way the goal is set up is it's based around 4 building blocks. The first building block has to do with existing facilities and how they're operated. EPA looked at the fleet of facilities across the country, and in building block 1, we looked at what's the average improvement we think can be achieved in efficiency of operation. This is, we think, about a 6% improvement nationally, but each state's going to be different. Some facilities are much more advanced already. Arkansas, for example, has a facility that came online December 2012. It is probably the most efficient coal-fired power plant in the country because it has the latest and greatest tools in place. Other folks are looking at a fleet of power plants that are 40 and 50 years old. There are tools that are in place that you could make improvements through operations or tweaking some equipment and be able to get an improvement out of that. We think, on average is about 6%, and that went into the plan that was put forward. Secondly, we want people to look at lower emitting sources and how do we get that achieved. Part of that is we'll be looking at natural gas. There's if you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area or San Antonio, you're very well aware of the supply of natural gas that's come in the last couple of years. Texas and our states and our region have an abundance of shale plays that can produce that gas, so it's not like the importing it will have to be done and the cost associated with that. So we have a ready supply. And gas plants that were built and have been operated principally as peaking units over time have the technical capability to be operated longer periods. And on average, we think that you can get 70% use out of the facility. It's not going to be 100% round the clock type operation, but at 70%, we're going to see some improvement in operations from various facilities. Some of these plants operate 20, 30, 35% of the time, and so we may be doubling the use of those. And so we think that it'll be a great way to lower emissions total for the state. The next area is getting into renewables, how we can use more solar, more wind. There's some nuclear aspects of that. If you have a new coal-fired power plant that has carbon capture associated with it, that would be in that category. And then the fourth area had to do with, and this is kind of where the conference is set up, looking at energy efficiency and how we can actually lower demand for electricity that's currently being generated via coal-fired power plants. And so one of the real hooks on all this is that when the state produces a plan, it's going to be speaking on behalf of a number of agencies. The state environmental agencies traditionally have put together plans to do this, but in this case, the Public Utility Commission has a role in this. ERCOT has a role in the reliability aspect. The State Energy Conservation Office, maybe by financing projects, has a role here that really needs to be captured and included. And so we're looking for each state to submit a plan that will include those various aspects. We asked states, we looked at certain things and said, okay, here's some things we think you can do. And we included some of that in the goal-setting process, but other things were not. And so things like energy storage technology was not something we wrote into the plan, but it's certainly a component that could be. Last week, Encore announced huge battery electric storage investments that they see coming forward. That could really resolve some of the issues and make wind and solar a much easier buy-in. And so we think there are some things that we had not thought about that the states are the incubator of innovation. I used to work for a state agency. I can say that with no problems. I think that they do have good ideas that maybe we haven't thought about at EPA. And so we're looking forward to getting these ideas put together by the states. There are some real benefits from health aspects by having a plan, by doing this. We're talking about in the billions of dollars, 50 to 90 billion dollars, we think, through reduced hospital visits, reduced early deaths from associated lung ailments. So we do think that there are some true benefits that can be achieved that currently are being borne by the general public as a whole, and it kind of offsets some of the costs that be associated with changes in the regulatory structure. This is where the docket number is at the bottom down there. You need to use that to get your comments into the system. I encourage you to look at the Clean Power Plan website. There are a lot of activities in there. There's a whole toolbox for states as they plan. We have spent most of the summer working with each individual state to look at the numbers that went into the plan. There are improvements in those numbers where perhaps we had said a facility was operating at a certain level of efficiency that, it wasn't the correct one. That we need to know that, and states have been working on doing that. And so we're hoping to get all that stuff corrected in the final plan. This captures and is predicated on having a final rule by next June, and states would then have a year, if they're doing it standalone, to get a plan to us, June 2016. They could ask for additional time if necessary, up to a year. If they were working on a multi-jurisdictional plan, it would be up to 2 additional years. And then plans would have to be approved and go through a process, and then compliance would really start in 2020. And so there's a long period of time to get ready, and then the final numbers are due 2030. And so we're looking at a 15-year process, which will go to address some of the concerns people have about infrastructure changes that have to be made, increasing transmission lines, increasing gas pipelines, et cetera, changes in facilities. And so we're hoping that we can meet all those goals by spreading it out over time. And then this is a slide for future comments. We've assigned several technical experts in our regional office here in Dallas to address those to the states. We're glad to take your comments. Let us know if you've got some additional information or some questions you've got of how to get into the system. But really encourage, if you've got some ideas, December 1st is the deadline.